The human body was never engineered for prolonged stillness. For most of human history, survival depended on movement, walking, lifting, reaching, adjusting posture dozens of times per hour without conscious thought. Circulation remained active. Muscles repeatedly contracted. Metabolism stayed responsive. Then, within just a few generations, daily life changed. Chairs became the default position of modern productivity. Today, many adults remain seated for 9 to 11 hours a day, often without recognizing how continuous that stillness has become. What unsettles physiologists is not simply the absence of exercise. It is the uninterrupted nature of the sitting itself. Because the moment your body settles into a chair, several internal systems begin shifting, almost immediately. Electrical activity in major leg muscles drops sharply. Calorie burning slows. Enzymes responsible for breaking down fats become less active. This is not laziness. It is biology responding to immobility. Researchers sometimes describe prolonged sitting as placing the body into a state of metabolic idling. A low-energy mode, designed for short recovery, not for occupying most of the day. And yet, the earliest effects are invisible. No discomfort, no alarm, no obvious signal telling you something important has changed. Which is precisely why this pattern spreads so easily across modern life. One preventive cardiologist summarized it with unusual bluntness. The body interprets prolonged sitting as a signal that less physiological readiness is required. In other words, systems begin down-regulating, quietly, efficiently. But what physicians watch most closely is what happens next. Because one of the very first systems to respond is also one of the easiest to overlook, your circulation, and once blood flow begins to slow. The consequences extend far beyond stiff muscles, because the shift that occurs in your vessels within the first hour is more significant than most people realize. Within minutes of sitting, gravity starts working against you. When the leg muscles stop contracting, they no longer assist the veins in pushing blood back toward the heart. Circulation becomes slightly less efficient, not dangerously so, but measurably slower. It is a subtle transition. Blood can begin pooling in the lower limbs. Vessel walls experience less shear stress. The gentle friction that normally signals them to stay flexible and responsive. Without that signal, vascular function can temporarily decline. Researchers have observed that after about 60 to 90 minutes of uninterrupted sitting, arteries may widen less effectively. The change is reversible with movement, but repeated daily. Physicians begin to pay attention, because circulation is not just about transport. It is communication. Blood delivers oxygen, regulates temperature, distributes hormones, and removes metabolic waste. When flow becomes sluggish, the entire internal environment grows slightly less dynamic. Most people will never feel this happening. There is no pain receptor for slowed circulation. But in rare cases, especially during very long periods of immobility such as extended travel, physicians monitor for conditions like deep vein thrombosis, where a clot forms in a deep vein. Again, this is uncommon for otherwise healthy individuals. The larger concern is cumulative exposure. Hour after hour, day after day, year after year, the body adapts to whatever environment it experiences most, and when that environment is defined by stillness, metabolism begins adjusting next, becoming slightly more conservative with how it handles energy. Because the moment muscle activity drops, your metabolic engine does something surprisingly fast. One of the fastest changes during prolonged sitting happens at the metabolic level. Large postural muscles, especially in the legs and hips, are among the body's biggest consumers of glucose. When they remain inactive, demand for circulating sugar falls. At first, this sounds efficient, but the body prefers rhythm, periods of use followed by recovery. Remove the use and regulation begins to soften. Studies show that after several hours of uninterrupted sitting, cells can respond less effectively to insulin, the hormone guiding glucose from blood into tissue. The pancreas compensates briefly, but repeated days of low demand nudge the system toward reduced sensitivity, a pathway associated with insulin resistance. Nothing dramatic occurred in a single afternoon. The shift is incremental, detectable in laboratories long before it is noticeable in daily life. What concerns metabolic specialists is the pattern, long-seated stretches paired with modest energy intake. Over time, the body becomes slightly better at storing than at using. People often assume this process is tied only to weight gain. Not entirely. Even individuals who exercise regularly can experience these short metabolic slowdowns if most waking hours remain still. A reminder that workouts and daily movement influence the body in different ways. So while circulation adjusts first, metabolism is not far behind. And when both are operating at a quieter setting, posture itself begins to matter more than many realize, because the structure supporting you right now adapts quickly to whatever position you ask it to hold. The spine is designed for movement, not static loading. When you sit, the pressure across the spinal discs increases, in some positions, even more than when standing. Over time, these gel-like cushions begin redistributing fluid, subtly changing shape under constant compression. You won't feel it happening. But the body is highly adaptive. Ligaments lengthen slightly, hip flexors tighten. Upper back muscles reduce their engagement. Gradually, posture begins shifting toward the position most frequently held. Physicians sometimes refer to this as postural creep, the slow remodeling of supportive tissues in response to sustained positioning. At first, it presents a stiffness when standing up, a knee to stretch, a shoulder roll that feels unusually relieving, easy to dismiss. Yet chronic mechanical stress is closely watched because it contributes to conditions such as lumbar disc herniation, where part of a spinal disc presses outward and irritates nearby nerves. Again, this is not an overnight event. It is accumulation, the body reinforcing whatever pattern dominates your day. What makes prolonged sitting particularly deceptive is that discomfort often arrives late, long after tissues have been adapting beneath awareness. But structural changes are only part of the story. Because while your skeleton adjusts externally, something far more protective begins softening internally, your cardiovascular conditioning. And the speed at which that decline can begin is faster than most people would expect. The heart is remarkably efficient. Give it regular demand, and it maintains strength with quiet reliability. Reduce that demand, and it adapts, not dramatically, but strategically. During long stretches of sitting, total energy expenditure declines. Over weeks and months, this can slightly lower cardiovascular conditioning, the body's ability to deliver oxygen quickly when needed. You may not notice it at rest, but climb several flights of stairs, walk uphill, rush across a street, and recover might take a little longer than it once did. Cardiologists watch this closely because reduced daily movement is associated with gradual shifts in blood pressure regulation, lipid balance, and vascular resilience, factors that influence long-term cardiac risk, including conditions such as coronary artery disease. There's a quiet principle in preventive cardiology: the heart responds not to intention but to demand. In other words, planned exercise helps, but the body is equally shaped by what fills the remaining hours of the day. If most of those hours signal minimal effort, the cardiovascular system recalibrates toward that expectation. Still, the most surprising effect of prolonged sitting may not involve the heart, the spine, or even metabolism. It involves the organ interpreting all of these signals simultaneously, adjusting behavior, alertness, and even mood in response. Because when the body grows still for too long, the brain begins changing its patterns as well. The brain continuously reads the body for context. Movement suggests engagement with the environment. Stillness, when prolonged, can signal conservation, a state associated with lower arousal. Over time, reduced physical activity is linked with lighter dips in alertness, slower cognitive transitions, and subtle changes in mood regulation. These shifts are multifactorial, but neurologists often note how strongly brain chemistry responds to physical rhythm. Even brief walks increase cerebral blood flow. Postural changes stimulate sensory pathways. Muscle activity releases signaling molecules that help support neural function. Remove those inputs for much of the day, and the brain adjusts its operating baseline. This does not mean sitting is inherently harmful. It is an essential part of modern work and recovery. What matters is interruption, standing, stretching, walking a few minutes each hour. Small movements restore the biological signals your systems expect. One occupational health researcher summarized it simply: the body tolerates stillness best when it is temporary. Seen this way, prolonged sitting is less a single risk and more a pattern, one that gradually influences circulation, metabolism, structure, and cognition without demanding attention. So, the next time you settle into a chair, it may be worth remembering: your body is always adapting to what you repeatedly ask of it. And often, the most protective change is not dramatic exercise, but but the decision to move a little sooner than you have to,